One. Greetings and welcome back, everyone, to Into the Nexus, the podcast all about Heroes of the Storm. I'm Garrett, here as always with Kyle, and rejoining us triumphantly. It's been a little bit, we just realized, not for any particular reason, but coming back on the show, not Paradox. Welcome back, dude.
Hey, thanks for having me again. Yeah, it's been just a little bit, but it is fun either way. I always appreciate coming back on the show.
Yeah, happy to have you here, man. I mean, and what a week! What a week! I mean, we like this this is the fun time to have you on, because last week it was PTR. The notes were here. We had to go like point by point, get real technical. Now it's here. We've already gotten that out of the way. We can actually have a human conversation about what it's actually like to play this patch on the live game.
Oh yeah. And it is a different one. I think I at first kind of undersold the turret changes. Like even in my video, I kind of just went right past it. I was like, oh, it's a little bit more like League of Legends. It's gonna take a bit of practice to get used to it. But it's like those things hurt. Like you don't get slowed anymore, but those things hurt. It says 40% more damage and lowers your armor and stuff. It's like that hurts. So it's like you really do need to pay attention to that. It will take a while to get used to, but oh man. This whole week's been wild and Tassadar and all that, so I'm excited to dive right into it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, lots to talk about. Before we get into it, we do want to thank those of you supporting us over at patreon.com/ITN, particularly like guest episodes for this, because we get to remind you that we pay our guests, and it's because of your support over at patreon.com/ITN that we get to do that. So thank you very much, because we like hanging out with Not Paradox, and we also like respecting his time. So thanks for the support, everybody. And thank you to some of our more recent patrons. We got two Daniels this week, Daniel Glodek and Daniel Schwartz. Thank you so much. And also Telic Attack. Thank you for signing up over at patreon.com/ITN. You also get some perks like access to our Discord, signups for our monthly game nights with patrons. We'll be having one of those very soon. So head on over to patreon.com/ITN if you like our show and you want to support us. But without further ado, there is so much to chew on this week. Let's get into it with this week's news.
We're on, boys! Ha-ha! Let's liven up this place!
Point me to the stage!
Stay a while and listen.
So season 2 is here. I figure we can start kind of talking about some of the larger changes to the game. Like, how are we feeling about the new structures and cores? And then we'll get into Tassadar. We'll talk about Tassadar a little bit later. But 2020 season 2 is here. You know, get back in there, hit the ladder again. But with it comes all of the major changes to structures and to cores that we talked about last week.
Now, can I jump on a topic you very quickly said there? Get back into ranked. Oh, it was nice.
Was it?
The last week of the season, it was sane. My placements the first week of the season, it's pretty sane. And I head around and I'm looking at all these people complaining about no mount reward. And I'm thinking to myself, did no mount leave ranked with people who play ranked because they want to play ranked? This was fabulous.
It is. I don't know. I mean, this last season, I haven't had too much trouble. Like I just solo queue on my main most of the time, and I'm like, I haven't had too many complaints about ranked, and that could be it. I never really thought about it because, I mean, because there is no like reward to go for. It is kind of true. I'm just playing, you know, like I'm not really like, I'll go for like a goal. I'll give myself a goal still every season and I'll try to go for that, but I'm not like rushing to get that to make sure that I get the mount and then I can go to something else. It's like, I just kind of play. So you might be right on that.
It's something I'm noticing with games in general right now, and Heroes. I've had my own. I did have a pretty rough end of the season, but this has more come out of the new mode over in Hearthstone Battlegrounds, because there's just a big number that gets bigger when you win and gets smaller when you lose. And that's it. There's like no rewards to chase. You're just playing it for the fun of the mode and like slowly working on your MMR. And it is refreshing in its simplicity and how old school it feels. And And so I think there's something to it. I don't know. I'm not saying I want every game on Earth to like get rid of their fun. Like this isn't like the end of battle pass, which is exactly what the headline of this should be if it's a YouTube video with like some big dramatic thumbnail. But I'm kind of enjoying simpler game systems for their ranked modes. I think it's okay, and I think there might still be a world where that's the way to go with your ranked mode. But Kyle, dude, I haven't thought about that, but I think you might be onto something. However, I have not shared either of your experiences, although quite a bit of it was personal. Rexar doesn't work anymore, and I'm Rexar one trick. So, yeah.
Sure, there's some trouble out there, and to dive into that tower trouble, it's wild. It is limiting in some ways, empowering in others. Certainly on attack, I played a Diablo game yesterday. I felt like half my options were removed, but I could also help everyone just burn the fort, and then all my options were back online to an extent. We just weren't making that dive the second the wall went down. On the defense, though, the world is wide open, and I feel like I really get to get in there and like give it hell, give it a chance. And buildings still go down with plenty of speed if everybody's focus firing.
I had the most insane set. Granted, not unranked. I'm back trying to find my roster in quick match before going back into ranked, since things are kind of topsy-turvy for me. I had the most insane session with Sonya. I had a thought that Sonya would probably work pretty well for me with the new tower changes, and I've like won all of my Sonya games this week. It's like crushing. Like they can't stop me. I'm just murdering fools. And at 13, I pick up no escape, and I can survive a couple tower shots and get out with my life. So I'm getting some dives out post 13, and it's really working for me. So I think I've got that on lockdown. I now need to find like a backup.
Yeah, no, I think Sonya's a good option right now, because I mean, she can even just bust through turrets. So it's like, if you're just worried about like, maybe you're worried that you don't want to dive and take like all this new damage that's out there. She can just rip through turrets very quickly. So it's like turrets have like 4,300 health, and then she just sits there, auto attack W, auto attack W, auto attack W, and that turret just drops. And it's like, so yeah, I would say Sonya's a pretty good option right now. I think the only thing you need to be kind of worried about is like if your W accidentally goes past the turret and hits someone, now all the turrets attack you. And
has happened.
Which if you're on the opposing side against a Sonya, hint of a little way to counter a Sonya.
No. Okay, I'm going to kick you off the show now. You're giving my secrets away.
And this is what everyone should be thinking about for every hero, though, is if you take just a little bit of damage from some ability, a Diablo that throws out his W a little too early, his Fire Stomp a little too early, a little too close to the turrets, that doesn't do a lot of damage on the way towards you, does a little bit more damage on the way back. So if you take a hit on the way there and then move before it goes back, now he takes more damage than you took. Same thing with Sonya's. The splash damage of W doesn't do very much. Take that, they take more damage from you. So there are a lot of tricks on defense and a lot fewer tricks on offense. So
which is right.
Which is good. Yeah,
that feels
it's
good.
A new change. I mean, it's like there's ways to abuse all of these new changes. It's just a matter of like finding the one that's for you. As far as like taking people out, I will say that there is way more importance on pushing after you've gotten a couple kills than there was before, because that's the opportunity that you're actually going to have to do that. If you don't push while you've gotten kills, you are wasting a lot of important time. And that's like so for offense, that's even more important than it was before. For defense, though, I mean, there's a lot more that you can do alone, which kind of gives you more opportunities for your team to like go do something else, like do camps or do go cover another wave or go gank or something, because like you can hold a lane versus like 3 people relatively easy now.
Yeah, I've had a lot of thoughts about this. I'm really glad that you mentioned the whole like, essentially what you said there was learn which abilities do the least amount of damage that you can intentionally take damage from to gain an upper hand into the defending position. And I've been thinking about this recently because we even talked about it last week. Like, it almost seems fitting that the Tassadar rework came in with this, because there's going to be Psy Storms everywhere. You can put dip a toe in the Psy Storm. I think we might all start collectively gaining a lot more ability knowledge, like via osmosis, because of this, because it is more important. Like, you made a really good case for studying abilities and finding out how much damage they do, and also if there's a different state of how much damage it's doing, like you mentioned with Diablo on the way out, doesn't hurt so bad, so intentionally take it on the way out, dodge it on the way in, or the way back. And that's a really cool thing that you may have not been as incentivized to learn before, but now if it means you're going to totally rock that Diablo's world because they're overextending into a structure, it's a little more incentivization there to actually study up.
Oh yeah, and you could learn a lot relatively quickly by just looking through. I mean, I think Deathwing's W in Worldbreaker form, can't remember the name at the moment, but it's the little bubble, and it pops the bubble, and then there's leaves a little thing on the ground, and it just kind of sits there. That does I don't know, let's throw a number out, 400 damage when it pops, but then it does 7 damage.
It's
while it's actually out.
Lava burst,
and its damage difference is huge. So it's if you just were to just wait until it pops and then just step on it for a little bit, yes, you get slowed for a little bit, because I used to do that when I played Lili, so that I could trigger my passive easily. And now that's just going to be something that everyone should know, not just Lili players. So yeah, I think that's I didn't even think about that, though, that's going to be something that the people that are willing to do a little bit more research into each hero are going to come out advantageous, especially on defense. So I don't think about it. Hopefully that does do that, though. It kind of increases the general knowledge of everyone's. I
mean, can we think of a hero that can't control themselves? Because yeah, it's kind of weird and maybe a shame that someone like Lunara can't do Splinter Spear while pushing, because that might accidentally fly in a cone shape towards a hero. Ricochet Tracer might be in a little bit of trouble. As you mentioned, that the Lava Burst business is a great one to stick a toe in without taking a lot of damage. Malfurion can't heal his team as much when they're pushing, but you're already pushing, so Tyrande, all those sort of situations. Whitemane, we've got a lot of healers based on dealing damage to enemy heroes, but they can all control themselves. Is there a hero in this game that can't help itself to not hit a hero?
I'm drawing a blank at the moment. I think the Ricochet is kind of the best example, though, because it's you could stop attacking, but by taking that talent, you are actively at a disadvantage on offense. And so your best bet is probably not to take that talent, which, I mean, if Mokru is in the chat right now, he would probably say that was one of the better talents to take. And he said almost never take the healing talent at a tier. But I think at this point, if you want to be able to siege safely, you sort of have to take something other than that talent. So that is interesting that heroes like that are at a disadvantage. As far as someone who can't control themselves at all for damage, I know damage over time is one of those things that may be patched, because they've talked about that they're looking into that, because Gul'dan, if you get a corruption on someone and then you walk out of range and then walk back in range, it's going to continue attacking you. When that's different from how most damage over times work, as far as for everything else in the game. If you have a damage over time on you, you can still channel things, you can still Hearthstone, you can still do so many others, you can still mount up. I mean, there's so many other things you can do while you have standard damage over times on you, that being able to take back turret aggro seems like it's inconsistent. They said they were looking into it, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to change it. So that's something to think about, is damage over times. But you brought up some really good ones. I don't know.
Well, and in that same breath, we can talk about summons. There's a world where, and I think it's different for each hero. If Zagara puts a Hydra on you and you run into tower range and she chases you, in that case, it'd be nice if the tower was no, Mr. Hydra, kill the Hydra. And then it was okay, Zagara, you cast the Hydra. Now I'm mad at you afterwards. But in the case of Nazebo, he puts a Gargantuan in there. I'd kind of like if it focused Nazebo rather than the Gargantuan because there's a lot more health there, and he's kind of cheesing the tower in a very Asmodan sort of way.
Oh yeah,
I've been in my games. It seems like there's more importance than ever to get the two front towers down, so that there's only one one structure that could target at any given time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in like the last few days, I've had really good success with intentionally being the one to like say we're pushing on the fort and there's going to be a fight. I'm the first one to get the fort to lock onto me, and it works out. So like as a sort of like tank mindset. As long as you there's a lot of trust I think that goes into your teammates here, but like I was playing with a Genji and I could tell when they were like ready. They're ready to go in. They want to get wild. I'm like, well, all right, well, I'm going to lead with my spear on Sonya, and like, you know, if it's a late like a level 20 keep push, you know, I'm taking Nerves of Steel, I'm taking Ignore Pain so that I can just intentionally get that keep to lock onto me so the rest of my team can just go nuts. That particular game too, there was a Deckard, and so the potions were already down. I'm like, I know I can get to my Deckard's potion in time once this gets dire. I know I can get to the potion in time because I have move speed.
Oh yeah, and I think people also misunderstand how many heroes in this game can tank towers for their team, even with the increased damage that they're doing now. It's still possible. I mean, there was a whole gimmick for a long time, and it's not really a gimmick. It's just one of the features of this character is Illidan. He will tank keeps and cores for his team and never have to worry because he can out heal the damage of it. Well, there's something that actually kind of flipped in this that's now more beneficial for Illidan to do that now than it was before. One, he can trigger it to attack him on his own choice. And he can leave up minion waves, which allows him to push better if he can trigger this against an opposing hero. Number two is that before he had a challenge with the keep because the keep would slow him. Well, the slow has been removed from the keep, which means that he can now continue to get his cooldowns going over and over and over. So he can just go on a keep as early as, I mean, really whatever level that there's just a keep available, and he could just take it. And there's nothing stopping him. And if there's a hero there, it allows him to now have a stacking wave of things that can help him do this. So I mean, there are certainly buffs to certain heroes and other heroes that are willing to take tower shots and can survive tower shots are now even stronger than they were before because you can choose to take those as opposed to your minions.
Well, and they did go through and fix a lot of our old physical armors and standardize them. So we talked about in the past, Urel's Dauntless was working on towers, mercenaries, monsters, summons, minions. Now they went through and made sure Johanna's Reinforced at 60 armor for physical is now doing that as well. Kel'Thuzad's Armor of the Archlet, Samuro's Deflection. So we're cleaning up the text, which is really nice. And those talents like Earth Ally for Kairazim say hero damage. So that didn't get affected there. That's very like World of Warcraft of us. So we're looking at this and being like, how can we use our current understanding of tanks and supports to make a good team? And what we tried out yesterday in a 5-stack was double tank. Basically, you know, offlane Arthas for the Sindragosa, so maybe we can get a little wild, but also running that second tank like a Diablo or ETC, a Nubarak, so that when one tank went into CC aggressively, they could bail, and the other tank kind of take over and continue to CC and help us with that push. That was actually less effective than what we saw otherwise on enemy teams, which was, let's not take a tank. Let's just skip tank entirely, have so much damage we destroy the buildings faster. The tank is already a burden in that push anyway. You mentioned Illidan. Like, let's not tank with ETC, who's going to go hit heroes and cause a big ruckus and problem for himself and die in there. Let's just do Urel, Sonya, Illidan instead.
It's interesting. I mean, I think the tank's still invaluable for team fights, but there's so many map strategies out there that don't even involve team fights. So that could be a very interesting change, is why even draft a tank? You know,
how did that play out in your defense, Kyle? I'm sorry, I kind of want to follow up. Like, if you had the tank and they didn't, and they pushed on your structures, I would assume you'd be kicking their ass.
The problem was early level advantages because of the massive amount of damage, right?
Gotcha.
And it's that old problem of, they don't have a tank, they don't have a support. Everyone, we're not going to auto win. We need to, calm down because their first team fight damage advantage without our 10s is going to be huge, particularly when we're looking at things like Johanna, who have rather lacking CC until we reach that 10 point.
That's interesting. Interesting point. So are we back into snowball strategy territory?
Maybe. And I mean, also I saw double push Asmodan with an Abathur clone yesterday and it wrecked. But, that's something that I don't think the devs need to worry about right now. That's more like the world has changed. I don't know how to deal with it. I'm going to get weird as a reaction.
Yeah, like wild compositions always come out whenever these changes happen. And sometimes it doesn't actually need to have like a wild answer to it. Sometimes it just needs people to go, okay, this is a new possibility. And we just need to find out a way to adapt in a standard team comp. And I mean, this happened with a lot of the other changes as well. As like standard team comps tend to be standard because it gives you an answer to everything. You just need to be willing to send the right person to deal with it. So if they're running a lot of damage to tank these turrets and dive through, then you just need to figure out what in a standard team comp actually answers that. And instead of sending you just send your wave clear to deal with something like this so that you wave clear and the turrets start attacking them. It may need a wave clear in a tank so the tank can just sit there and CC them a whole bunch so they can't destroy the towers quickly while the wave clear deals with the wave. So I'd imagine it's going to take some growing pains, but I think during that time, this is a great time for if you're someone who can think of something to abuse it quickly before people catch on. And that could be a decent way to bump up a little bit in rank. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, we could see a meta shift. I was watching some scrims on the PTR, and for the most part, the high level play didn't change very much. I think they used a little bit more Sylvanas than normal, which is already kind of a meta hero for them. But otherwise, the high rank play didn't really change too much because when they were going to end, it usually, when they go to end the game, it's rarely an end that gets close. For the most part, it's an end that's like, you've got an extra 50% on that core that you could do if you really needed to. So the extra core changes didn't change too much. And the pushes, they tended to push after they killed a couple people. So defenses weren't too much of an issue either. So that level of play didn't change too much. But I started watching one of the teams I'm working with a little bit is a little lower rank, and their games have gone a little wild. They play a lot safer now because of those turret changes. So I don't know. It's interesting to see all of the changes across the board. I think once people get more used to watching some of these games at this level, it's going to kind of trickle down to people going, okay, the game, we can get back to normal again. Because I do think going completely without a tank is scary. But that split push strategy where you just draft 4 pushers and then a support, that's been a thing for a while. It's just that it does have counterplay, and it's usually comes down to drafting a little bit more wave clear in a standard team comp. But
those sort of things are active. Those are looking at the changes and saying, oh, here's how I can exploit this in this time of chaos.
Yeah. No, you're right. Completely.
The lasting reactions I feel are going to be things like Li Ming, because our brains say, well, Kael'thas is taking a tower shot and that living bomb lasts an extra second or two and gets me in trouble. What if I'm Li Ming? What if I'm Hanzo? Ooh, there's something that feels good about that. I'm not sure what's going on, but something about being completely out of range of buildings feels nice, and I'm going to continue to draft them in every game. And I am seeing just so many Li Mings right now, and I think it's just because something feels right about this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that could be I think that a lot of the changes in the meta are just feelings, really. We've talked about this before, a few shows back that I was on, and we talked about how much of what we pick is off of a feeling. And I remember there was an old survey 7 or 8 years ago on League of Legends, and they said that it was on World of Warcraft actually. It said that people would rather pick weapons that felt good to use than stats in a lot of cases. And they found 2 weapons that had very similar stats, but one had a more satisfying like clunk when it hit the target. They used, I think it was like bows and guns in particular. They found that people were more likely to use a bow because it had a more satisfying sound and everything than the gun, and even though they had the same stats. So if they gave the same choice to buy either or, then they changed like the sounds of them a few times, and it was like this entire thing about that. And it just makes me think that like, yeah, it just makes me think that like the same could be true. Just that satisfying feeling and be able to do damage while you're outside of the towers might be subconsciously moving people in that direction of playing those heroes. Even though that still might not be it, but I do think that there is certainly a benefit to that range.
Right, it's one less thing to worry about. Right, especially if you're a mage, like you're just like, oh well, I'm kind of a glass cannon. If I get caught out, it's scary. If you're on top of that, worried that my incidental damage is going to cause structures to lock onto me. If you can omit that from your concern pie, then you're good. But I've been thinking a lot about Kael'thas lately, because of going all the way back to the earlier conversation about dipping your toe into damage intentionally. It's like, what are you going to do? Dip your toe into the flame strike that does all its damage in one go? Like, that's kind of an upside for someone like Kael'thas. Okay, well, he can't control his living bombs. All right, but if living bombs are spreading, are you that unhappy as Kael'thas?
And he's one that he's just in that range of the towers that you could step back for a second, but his bombs are always doing damage. I guess the challenge is that if someone does get hit by a bomb and they're taking damage, he can't step in range of towers, which means he can't auto attack the towers. He can't cast abilities on the towers. He can't do anything. So if you are someone who can safely take a bomb, is a pretty decent advantage, because you're effectively, you got to remember, you can't heal structures, but you can heal your tank. So if your tank takes a bomb, which then reduces the damage that your structures takes, then you can heal back your tank. It's effectively healing the structures. So on situations like Kael'thas, I think it's worth taking that step forward, taking a bomb that he put on a turret, and now he has to just step back, because the whole duration of that bomb is going to do, I don't know, let's say we're early levels, the whole duration is going to do 200 damage. Well, his auto attack damage at early levels is 50 to 60. He can attack once per second. You may have just prevented 200 damage from a structure. And because of that 200 prevented damage, you get healed back, and it's like you healed your structure for 200. So I think that there's a lot of, especially for tanks and teams that have high sustained healers, I think this is the time that people can really abuse just that gimmick on defense, even more so than others. I mean, for like light damage, of course, I think everyone can tap into it, but for heavy damage, I think there's still a thought process of, I could save the turret some health here.
Well, what about taking it to a different extreme and saying, why don't we counteract that armor? Like Uther, he's kind of down. People aren't really feeling him right now after all the health nerfs, but he supplies armor, which means we might be able to dive something. Could that be where we end up with this? Is just we're all taking armor talents we've ignored since they stopped stacking in HGC?
I think that's an idea. I think that, again, as far as the changes go, you normally still, like in the old game, what were the opportunities that you're diving, right? And you need to think, what are the opportunities that we were diving in the past? And what are the opportunities that we actually need to do those same dives? Because I think most of the time that you would do a dive is when you had like a light advantage, like a level 10 to level 9, and the enemies are still alive, but you still want to get something done during this time. And those are the times you'd want to push. Well, the challenge about drafting Uther is, are you going to get that advantage, that 10 to 9 advantage, and also be in that situation? It is possible. It's just, you need to look at his advantages and disadvantages, right? He's a healer that has mana problems. So if you are winning with it, I do think that he's going to have that potential that other healers won't have. Especially like a Malfurion, which was mentioned. I didn't even think about that. You lose a huge portion of your healing because you can't Moonfire people. So
right,
there are going to be
the Punisher,
heroes.
like like, cool your jets. You got the Punisher. We don't need to push. Like, I'd love to just sit around and be like, oh, Thrall. He already felt so bad and was losing his solo lane so often, but I can't chain lightning the building.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I mean that's the thing though, is it's like I think what you've brought up is that there are now going to be healers that are better on offense and healers that are going to be worse on offense. And that's something that we didn't really have as much, or at least it was much more nuanced in the idea that, yeah, Malfurion was pretty good for offense because you could like spread out during like your Punisher jumps over. You could have two people jump over and still have regrowths on them, even though you're nowhere near them, and go for it. Well, now that's going to be good, but having that Uther armor will be more beneficial than having anything else for an offense. So I think it'll be a little bit more obvious when we have heroes that are better for offense.
I got something to report. I just tested this out while we were talking. Kael'thas Gravity Lapse deals no damage.
So you can see.
You can freely gravity lapse in range of towers.
I mean, that's nice. That's a nice.
That is nice. That's actually funny how many like random things do damage that you wouldn't think, like Earthquake. You don't think that it does damage, but it actually does like very, very low damage. And the reason for it, the reason they even put damage on it to begin with, is that it triggered your passive, your Mana Tide, or your it's not called Mana Tide until you take level 4, but whatever that passive is, Earthquake triggers that. But it only does like 50 damage. So it does make you feel like you're not doing damage when you pop that, but you actually are. So there are actually a lot of CCs in this game, or like random things that do stuff like that. They do like very light damage so that it can like trigger something. So that's kind of interesting that like CC without damage is going to be notable. And I do think people are going to be more aware of their incidental damage, which is going to help like sleep heroes. Like heroes that sleep things, because random damage would always wake them up. So now people are going to go, okay, well, they're slept. That's going to be the same thing of when I'm near turrets, right? I don't do damage or else something bad happens. So that may end up changing something like that. So I don't know. Overall, they're pretty interesting changes. And I think most of us will get used to it relatively quickly, but there will be shifts in meta. And it's, I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's a great point. If we add damage to our CCs as well, those talents suddenly become bad. Like I am often taking Spreading Plague. It doesn't wake up my targets when I'm Mal'Ganis sleeping people, but
it will trigger the turrets attacking.
Whereas otherwise I'd just be sleeping the back line.
But should you be taking that? Someone's gonna trigger the tower at a certain point, right? Like what I'm getting at is like I want to challenge this idea of like you're gonna need to do damage at some point. So like I don't know. I'm trying to think of, not that like all damage is bad, because at some point damage needs to be dealt, but like which damage is better than others, and that's why I brought up Kael'thas versus something like an Earthquake from Thrall, like you were mentioning. Like that's really incidental damage that could cause issues and not secure a kill, but you know you got the slow. There's so many factors into it. Like, do we start having a hierarchy of damage where more damage at once is worth a lot more than constant small ticks of damage, if we think we're going into a game where we're going to do a lot of fighting around structures?
Oh yeah. So I guess what you're saying is like, let's ignore the fact that yes, there's random things you can do to stop one or two people from pushing, but we still need to get structures down. Things need to die. The game is a lot safer if you can end the game earlier when you have the advantage, rather than wait until experience slowly gets equal. So the idea is, what are the heroes that allow us to push in? What are the heroes that can tank some tower shots? They can tag people. I think like a good example is like Joanna, right? You can take that trait talent level 1, get this 1,000 health shield that gives you a decent portion of time that your team can deal damage. You have a very easy time of triggering all the towers by simply using your blind, which covers like the entire fort range. And so you can immediately grab the towers for your team, pop the trait, and survive through a huge amount of damage as you guys take out the front wall. Then you wait till you have your trait back up and you go in for the fort. So I think looking for things like that is also very important. And it's something that I guess I haven't really been thinking about too much, because I'm so used to going, okay, we'll just push with the objective. We'll just push without after we get a couple kills after like an objective fight or something. But yeah, I mean, making sure that you do have some tools like that. I think Zarya is another option that you can deal damage, that you can trigger one of the towers on yourself, and then you could stay out of range of the other tower and put a shield on whatever person that tower is attacking. Now you've instantly gotten a full energy bar, and she melts through turrets if she has a full energy bar. So there are some buffs to some people that are a little underutilized as well. But yeah, I think that is something that we definitely need to be thinking about. Is on offense, we just got this huge nerf. How do we turn this? Like, how do we still win with this? And what can we do about this? And I think one huge benefit is the fact that your minions aren't dying. If you're tanking the turret, your minions are still there. And if you've ever clicked on, I think you need like Ollie OBS to be able to see this. But if you click on the minion with Ollie OBS in a replay, it will tell you the damage. And this is something that a lot of people don't know, because this breakdown you don't see in game, but it shows you the damage that a ranged minion does. And a ranged minion will do 27 damage to a hero, 40 damage to an enemy minion, and then 120 damage to an enemy structure. And so there's this breakdown of like what a minion does, and it does way more damage to structures. So if you can just get those ranged minions to a structure and have them survive, that's 360 DPS essentially. I don't think they actually fire once per second, but let's just say 360 DPS that's going towards something that could be more than what a lot of people can do to structures in the early game if you can just tank the structures and keep them alive for longer. So there are a lot of tools that you can do to abuse this for offense as well, to increase your value anyways.
I mean,
well, it gets interesting too when we mix in something like Gazlo, right? Like Gazlo could pop his armor trait because he wants to keep all his summons, who would be a priority over the lane minions.
That, you know, it's funny. That was actually like the first thing I thought of when they made that change. Was I was like, I'm always so annoyed that you summon your turrets and they just die to the tower, and it's always the first thing that gets focused is summons. When I'm playing Asmodee, I love that summons are the first thing that gets focused because I can summon them faster than the turrets can kill them. But then like on Gazlo, I'm like, no, not my turret. I wanted to do more DPS to things. And so it was like the first thing I thought of was on Gazlo. I was like, oh man, I can zap someone really quick, drop down a bunch of turrets. But I'm like, when they said 40% more damage, I'm like, oh, I might not do that actually. Like that seems pretty spooky.
Yeah. I don't know. At the most base level, I feel like we're every battleground we're on now. Anytime you're pushing on a wall, it feels like a Dragonshire. Like getting off to one eight, like you're trying to get the towers only fire one of you at a time if there's not a minion wave. And but I think it's kind of cool. I mean, think about all the layers that we just talked about, and that it's not necessarily as bad for offense as you might initially think. Like you said, not Paradox, there's a serious upside to not being slowed. The fact that you can game the system offensively to get minion hits to land. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of exchanges going on. It's not, we didn't just lose offensive capability. I mean, yes, it is harder to be offensive into a structure now, but there's a lot of trade-offs happening in the way that this new system functions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're going to see, for the most part, I'd imagine once people get used to it and tanks learn that that's part of their job now, to take it, like do some damage to the opposing players so you can tank a little bit for your team. I think that it'll likely go a little bit back to normal, but I do think that feeling of like where people are like chipping one at a time, hitting damage and then walking back and then hitting damage and walking back, and it will be kind of an odd thing. That does teach a good mechanic though, to an extent, not necessarily while pushing, but being able to do damage and walk away from a fight allows mages to have a much safer playstyle. I always call it like the in and out playstyle, where you go and use all of your abilities and get out so you can't take damage from the enemy team. And that's a very important playstyle in team fights. It actually sort of teaches that playstyle a little bit, where you go and you use all of your abilities and you get out before the turrets change to your aggro. And then when you have your abilities back up, you go and use all of them again. So in a way, it does teach some pretty good mechanics if you're good at getting in and out really quickly. But at the same time, it may not do it in the way we want. Because if there's lingering damage in there, you just can't walk back in. You just have to sit there and kind of twiddle your thumbs or go do something else.
Yeah, like, but unless your tank
decides to step up, which is what I think should happen. It adds another job to your tank of knowing how much damage he can take and taking damage for his team. And then I do think it'll benefit the tanks that have more self-healing, and because they can take tower shots and just self-heal, so it's not all on the healer's job. It may also benefit healers that can prioritize one target. So Morales is an example for me anyways, is that she may get a little bit of a boost in the fact that she can focus all of her healing on the person who's taking all of the damage. And it's rare to have a healer that does this much like single target healing. Most of the strongest healers right now are like Lucio, Stukov, all these ones that do like huge, I'm saying like healers, not like just the healers that have the highest win rates, but just people that are known for having the highest healing at the end of the game tend to be AoE. So I do think like Morales might get a decent, a mini buff for the tanks that know to push forward.
The safeguard too. I mean, that's armor that can count for, a 25 or 30. So 6 tower shots out of the towers, right? So that'll get you pretty deep. Let's have the conversation on Reddit right now and in the community. There's a lot of people that feel the bosses and the objectives should have target priority over heroes, and that this tiered system's okay. It's okay if our heroes are jumped to the top of our aggro list, but you have a Punisher. Why is the building not helping out with the Punisher, and does that need to change?
I mean, it's just a change, and I think that's the hard part is I think with every change there's things that don't really make sense, like as far as like in the game, or things that will feel better in a different way. But I think sometimes it's nice to get us out of our comfort zones. Like that's why I've always been a prominent believer of like, I want to try out the change and try to adapt to it rather than try to go, well, what if it was different? Like, what if I was the game developer and I could change this in a different direction? Like, I would rather look at the game and go, this is what we've got, and how do I abuse this? How do I make this beneficial for me on either side? And what are the ways to change it? But let's get in the mind of the developer for a second and go, would it be better to have bosses and objectives prioritize the turrets? I do think that's a thing that you do benefit from, because the objectives are always when you felt safe to push. And a lot of times in low ranks, people never feel safe to push unless they have this big body with a huge health bar, charging in there, tanking everything. You can finally push. And now you still don't feel safe to push. You just have a big body with a big health bar that doesn't mean anything because you can still die to turrets. So again, I can use the example of, oh, well, it's very beneficial because your tank can tank the shots and then you get to keep your Punisher for longer. But it is kind of true that it feels bad almost that you don't feel safe pushing ever. So I could agree that like Punishers, Immortals, and bosses just take priority until they die, because that would feel better. I just think in general that would feel better. But at the same time, on offense, man, if I'm playing Joanna and I see that we've got a boss on our side, you can't heal the boss, but you can heal Joanna. So by tanking all the tower shots, I'm effectively healing the boss. And that's kind of what's going through my mind now that change is going, is it's pros and cons. You feel less safe going in, but if your tank knows what they're doing, you actually could have a better push. So there's still pros and cons to it. I think the feeling is the worst part about it, not having a time where a push ever feels safe.
My reaction is that I have really liked, if I'm defending against an objective or a boss, the team fight that breaks out, because it's not focusing the objective or the boss. I agree with most of what you just said. Well, basically, I agree with what you just said, but it was almost all from the attacker's perspective, right?
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right.
It's interesting to think about the system as it exists now from the point of the defender, because now, I think before there was a lot to be said of a counter strategy of well, the objective or the boss is coming towards us. All right, well, let's see if we can actually push past the objective or push past the boss and get a kill or two. And now that seems significantly more incentivized if the enemy team is pushing with their objective or their boss.
No, I think you're right. That was a strategy. And it usually was kind of a Hail Mary before, where it was like, oh, we'll lose if we can't win a team fight right now because this objective is going to wipe us with them helping. We're going to lose. And it was usually a Hail Mary. And it's actually teaching a high level strategy as a standard thing to do. So that could be something that we see way more often is, let's just force a team fight. Hey, this objective is going to be wailing away at our structures this entire time, but this is the time that we have our structures on our side. So if we force a team fight now, our structures are going to help us kill them. And then if we win this fight that's at an advantage to us, we can just go back and free clear the objective. So I mean, you can use this as a strategy on both sides. And I think this is something that hopefully people learn from, that they can use that to turn on it. So I really like that idea of just forcing team fights every time that there's an objective pushing.
It's an interesting thing. I don't know. Like, my gut reaction to a lot of this has been surprisingly positive. I kind of like how it's changed things up, and I'm also surprised at how quickly I'm seeing my fellow teammates adjusting to these changes. Because I haven't seen a lot of people just diving into Fort range, which is nice. And I was kind of expecting it. I was expecting a lot to, at least anecdotally, to see a lot more missteps, misplays into this new higher structure damage world that we find ourselves in. And yet I haven't seen as many. Again, it's anecdotal. I haven't played this. Like, it's nothing compared to, like, if you go, look at stats or whatever in terms of games played. But I don't know. I'm with you. I really like your whole philosophy of, like, well, think about it. How can if it's here to stay, think about how you can exploit it, how you can play it. And at the same time, I also think it's cool. I'm always down for conversations around, does it feel right? Like, does it feel like structures should attack bosses or objectives? I mean, it kind of does. Like, at a gut level, my feeling is, yeah, kind of feels like the big giant scary monster should probably be the focus of automated attacks. But from a gameplay perspective, I think it's just a decision to be made. You make a call, yes or no.
Oh, yeah.
And the way you play the game is different depending on that decision that's made by the developer.
It's, I don't know, it's a different one, but yeah, we've got it. And yeah, I think overall for me, change is usually good, only because it changes up everything. Like, again, Zarya wasn't in the meta. She may be in the meta now. Morales wasn't in the meta. She may be in the meta now. It's like, just simple changes like that could make a huge difference. And that's why I usually like change, because it gets boring to see the same things every day. And especially someone who's, like, casted a lot of games, it gets boring to see the same heroes banned and same heroes picked. And you can almost, like, predict it down to a T, to where there's been multiple games that I've casted where I've said, most likely these 4 heroes are banned. And then I'll just start talking about something else. All 4 of those heroes get banned. And then I go, okay, this is this map. So first pick is likely going to be this. And it's that. And it's just like, it's fun because it's like, oh man, look how well I know this game. But at the same time, it's like, it's not that crazy. It's like, because I saw it 40 games in the past. It's like, so it's nice to just see things change, different stuff. So yeah. I like it.
Well, and for me, the excitement is really in the talents, like double up. You could counteract armor reduction by using double up rather than doing defensive measures for the 100th time. And 100th is a generous statement. We have these talents we're just straight up avoiding for so long that might be able to come in. But the next part of the conversation is the cores. How do we feel about rocking cores with new abilities that I mistook for lane clear last week? So no lane clear either. So big old spider queen waves, whoop-oo, nothing happens. The catapults are fine.
It makes sense because they're triggered by the presence of enemy heroes.
Right.
But also weird. Another one of those feeling things, right? Like, it feels like that wave should be doing some damage to the little ants that are coming down the lane.
I was like, get him, you go, Spider Queen Core. You're gonna, what happened? Well, that was a giant, you even like reticle it. You're like, here it comes. There's gonna be a big wave.
Yeah, it's a little odd. I think the thing that's cool about the core changes is it kind of gives you the alt-track feeling on every map. And what I mean by that is like alt-track, there's like when it first came out, it was like, oh man, this objective is hard to end on. Then people kind of came down to you want to take out 2 keeps before you end the game. And that kind of became like an unwritten rule for, I'm sure it's written in a guide, but the unwritten rule that you should try to take down 2 keeps before you go. And now each map has kind of its own thing. A lot of people were saying, oh, the Sky Temple one is bad. It doesn't stop anyone. It should be buffed. And I was like, no, it just means that you get to end earlier on Sky Temple. Sky Temple's already a map that most people don't end by pushing. They usually just end by getting an objective, and it's the most boring way to end the game. There's no epic battle at the end. It's just there's an objective on the top, an objective on the bottom, your core is open, and you go, I don't know, we can send all 5 bottom, but if they're all 5 top, then we just lost the game. And it's like, that's not fun. I mean, even for the winning team, you're just going, okay, let's send 4 top, 2 bottom, and then wherever they show up, we just go to the opposite one, we win the game. And it's like, that's boring. So to have that core be easier to defeat than the other cores, I think that's fine. The tornadoes are just there for looks, and what a pretty decoration. But yeah, I think it's a cool gimmick of like, it makes the final fight more epic. And I really only think it's going to make a difference in like 5% of games. Like as far as the difference of who actually wins and loses, 5% of games. You just need to be a little bit more, you need to make sure you have a little bit more to end the game than you normally would. But most games end where you could easily do an extra 40 to 50% on that core without needing to worry about it. And that's where the games that are going to be tough is where you barely end. Like you have that last person alive before you finish that off. That's one of those games where that would not end there. It would go to another fight. So you just need to be a little bit more calculated on when you go through. And that's just my thought on that.
I agree. That's a good point to bring up. I like how it pushes back against like the single kind of like if you're in one of those games where your core gets low but it's not over, and then like single enemy heroes try to get in and finish it. I really like the way that it fights back against that, because that to me always felt cheesy that a single hero could go in and like finish off the core. And I've ended up in a couple experiences like that already this week on the live game. So that to me feels really good. Again, overall, I'm kind of digging it. The one I'm weirded out by while I was over in Quick Match is the one that feels the most effective to me right now is the damn Blackheart's Bay core. Again, a map that you could easily end on without ever even going and looking at the enemy's core, but it fires very often, and if you are not entirely on top of your control, you're going to get hit by one of those things.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that one. The one that I saw that is surprisingly hard to get around, it seems like it would be easy, is the Garden of Terror's dumb polymorph. That thing lasts so long, so it's relatively easy to dodge. It's a small AoE, but if you get hit by it once, you are polymorphed for way longer than it feels. Like I think it's supposed to be like 3 seconds, but it feels like you're polymorphed for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Well, and those ones are really interesting because they affect the heroes that would be doing the most damage to the core, like our Zul'jins and maybe our Valas. That polymorph is destructive. Whereas I found things like Cursed Hollow, I'll just stand in it because I'm locked on. We're ending the game. You hook me up with all the minus armor you want. I'm gonna Taz Dingo. I'm gonna Volt after this and double Hungering Arrow the core. Like that didn't really gel with what I thought would be happening. And all these rocking cores are in the position of punishing those teams that don't have siege in the first place.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll find a team, oh no, here comes Alarak to Haka, look out, like they're gonna try to take the core. And yeah, I mean, Alarak has an okay auto attack, but he can't reposition very often without taking his own abilities. He's not really gonna hook it up to Haka. Is laughable in that situation. And they now are completely limited from ending the game.
Yeah, I think that's another draft piece that people are going to need to look at, is like siege is important, and it's not like something to just shy away from. That's something that every team comp should have, and even more so, it's going to be an important piece instead of always looking, oh, do we have a mage? Do we have physical damage? Do we have a tank? Do we have a healer? Those like tags or traits are going to be super important to start including a little bit more of like, okay, we've got wave clear. Do we have siege? Like, because we're going to need this. Like, if we actually want to end this game, especially on maps like Cursed Hollow, where you don't have an objective to push for you. I mean, you could go get a camp, or you can go get a boss if you've got enough like of it to push with that. But overall, it's like if you're not able to get a boss, you need siege to end that game.
It's a brave new world that we live in. And the insane thing is we still have a Tassadar rework to talk about. Before we get to that, we do have a sponsor to thank for today's episode, Bombas. They are back sponsoring this episode of Into the Nexus. They make quite literally the most comfortable socks I have ever put on my damn feet. Kyle, I know you're a fan as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you've been doing a lot of walking lately in your Bombas socks.
Lots of pacing back and forth in my house, baby in the carrier. My socks need to hold up. And because I'm not wearing shoes anymore, because I'm not going outside, guess what I need? Fashionable socks.
You do. They need to be fashionable, and the Bombas socks are. And there's like so many fashions to choose from. Whatever is your jam, Bombas has you covered, and it's super, super comfortable. On top of that, they have things like no seams, built-in arch support, which I did not even know was a thing that you could do with socks. And they're supporting your favorite Heroes of the Storm podcast, so you should go check them out. On top of that, whenever you buy a pair, they give a pair to someone in need. Socks are one of the most requested items in homeless shelters. So whenever you buy a pair, you're helping get a pair of socks to someone who needs them. So go check them out. Give a pair when you buy a pair and get 20% off your first purchase at bombas.com/nexus. That's BOMBAS.com/nexus for 20% off your first purchase. Again, it's bombas.com/nexus. Getting a lot of use out of mine. I am doing the most walking/running I have done in a very long time for, I'm sure, what are very obvious reasons. I crave the sun right now, guys. I need the sun in my life. So, anyways, Tassadar rework. Let's get into it. Last week we did kind of a breakdown by abilities. So we're not going to go ability by ability. But Paradox, I'm kind of curious, like your gut reaction. How do you feel about the Tassadar rework?
So I think in general, he's a very, very strong mage. And I think that the big issue as it stands, and this is, I like to call this kind of like the Deckard triangle issue, because when Deckard's triangle first came out, I felt like I always landed that ability. I didn't ever need to slow people. I didn't need to do anything. People just didn't see it showing up until it was almost done, and then people were stuck in it. And so I would always take the quest talent because I was like, man, this quest is going to get done so fast. And it got done incredibly quick. I ended up with like 70% win rate with Deckard, and then out of nowhere I started losing a lot of games. I'm like, what is going on? They haven't nerfed him, that nothing's changed, and people just realized they were more quick to realizing where it showed up, and they were more quick to dealing with that. In a similar sense with Tassadar, I think that he is absolutely busted as far as the amount of damage potential that he has right now, and he has a ton of utility having wall at an early level. The thing is, he lost all of his survivability. So he used to have a shield. He could heal his full health bar off of just by auto-attacking while he had his shield on. And he used to have an instant out of combat that would just be, boom, disappears. He could reposition anywhere. He was indestructible while he was disappearing. He was invisible. And then he could just show up at a different location, put a shield on himself, full heal his health bar, and he was back to going in. He was a very hard to kill, slippery hero that just you could not deal with. Now he doesn't have an escape till 13, even if you want to take that talent. It is a nerfed version of that talent of his ability, and he has no real way to defend himself or heal himself, but he has so much more power. So I think that as it stands, he is an extremely powerful mage that you've got to jump on quickly, or else he is going to ruin you. And he does have like level 16. He has like 100-0 combo using the wall, but you're also using your only escape, which is someone tries to go for you, you wall them off and you walk away. So if you use that long cooldown wall too early for offense, you don't have it for defense. That's what I really think that he is just this uber powerful mage that we need to ditch that old mentality of, oh, Tassadar's just that thing we can't kill, to having a new mentality of he's an immobile mage we can jump on. And once we do that, I think he's in a pretty decent spot.
It reminds me a little bit of the Sylvanas rework, where on the other end out came a serious assassin. It's just that I feel like Sylvanas retained a lot more of her specialist like identity than Tassadar did. But if I look at Sylvanas and go, there was a very successful rework into honest to God assassin territory. Tassadar, I think, has done exactly the same for all of the reasons that you mentioned.
I'm definitely getting a release leaving vibe, as all the Tassadar mains are like, no, everything's great, everything's fine, these damage numbers are perfectly normal. Also, I'd never ban him because I know how to counter him, which is, as you said, easy thing. Like, you don't have to put together a big old Kairazim Diablo, like get fancy dive comp. You can just throw a Nova in there and it'll do the job. It'll get it done.
But you're right. His numbers are still very high. So it's like, I do want to say, okay, well, people need to learn to jump on him. And you don't even need to just anyone doing any damage to him can scare him off. But you're right. His numbers are still high. Like, I'm not using that as the only defense.
Well, and we have this perception. We see the Tassadar, the Protoss man floating, and my brain says, ignore him. He's what a butt. He's going to teleport away. He's going to shift. I don't want to deal with him. His numbers are also inflated. He's doing AoE damage constantly. There's no gleaming orb that a Nubarak can catch. That shock ray is just going to go through the whole team. So the counterplay and even the damage on Storm, that's not something a Nubarak can even handle. That is not a good draft situation for him.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. He's wild right now. I mean, he's a lot of fun to play, but he's wild right now.
I do not want to be a Nubarak right now, which makes me sad because I just rediscovered my love for a Nubarak like 2 weeks ago. Here we find ourselves.
Not the right time.
No,
not the right time. I have some very strong opinions about the builds I've seen work, but not Paradox. We got three main ones. We got Shock Ray, we got Sonic Storm, and we have Auto Attack.
Yep.
Is there a place for each? Where should we be going?
So I think they all have their place, but there are some important things to note about maybe hybriding a couple talents. Like, I think my first reaction was to go Q build, and I tried that out a few times on the PTR, and I felt like I was only really like poking people a little bit, and I felt like we had better heroes for that. But that doesn't mean that I was playing it 100% perfectly, so I could have just been wrong there. I tried auto attack build, but I was standing still so often that I felt like I was just getting jumped on. And again, this was when I was playing this in PTR, I was scrimming with Masters and Grandmasters players that they saw a new hero and they're like, we got to kill this thing. And so I think there was a good portion of that was purely because there was a lot of focus on the new hero. And then finally, W build felt like the most natural because you could still move around a lot and you had a huge damage potential, which is where I went full W build. And as of level 16, if I saw like Jaina step forward and she didn't have ice block, she was dead. Even though I was just alone with her, the wall, the W, the Q, that did her full health bar. And she was too slow to get away from the W or the wall that was also doing damage, that she would just die. And so I really thought that was like, this is the final build. But then my friend was like, you realize that the level 1 talent you put in there doesn't actually increase your damage at all. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, it just gives mana. And I was like, okay, well, let's look at this build again. So we started tearing this apart again. And I want to kind of tell people that don't stick to just because it has the symbol of your favorite or the ability of that. Don't overcommit into that. There are very powerful hybrid builds. And I think that's where he's going to end up sitting. Is I don't know the exact hybrid yet. So far, I'm liking Q at level 1 and then W the rest of the way. But be willing to open up. They have really pointed him in the directions where there is a for sure auto attack build, a for sure Q build, and a for sure W build. But if you actually look, there's certain talents at different tiers that might just be better by sneaking into another build. And I think that's where I really want to set in. Is I don't know 100% where he's going to lead. I do like a certain build, but I do think hybriding might be the best option for him.
What do you think of the there's a stack in here that definitely aids your standability in the Plasma Shield and Oracle, which is easy to miss that it has a rather good passive with 30 spell armor and restoring health per second.
Mm-hmm. It's odd. I looked at this talent and I was like, this is just weird, right? Like, I don't think it's going to see a lot of play. And then some people are like, this is like an ice block. And I was like, but it's only like 30 spell armor, right? Like, it's not really an ice block. I said, it's not bad. It does heal you a decent amount. And I was like, this will be great for the solo lane. But then I was like, this is level 13. The solo lane's kind of over by that time. And so I don't know where it fits, honestly. I feel like the absolute competitive scene is going to just dominate with having this potential to vision, and then the heroes that can abuse that. Like, you vision an area where you know they're doing a camp when you have an Illidan to hunt in or something, and it's like, I know there's something I'm missing on this talent that's huge, but as it stands, I feel like I'm blind to it. So I mean, enlighten me. If you've got some ideas for this talent, enlighten me. But overall, I'm like, I'm not seeing, I keep seeing his dimensional shift is like, okay, that's still an instant out of combat that I feel like you need. But I mean, if you see something in this talent that I'm missing, I'm
I think
all
I just
ears.
have like every HGC voice screaming in my ears. It's shields plus armor. Like, it is that is the best thing on the planet. You would never want to not have those things because it broke the seasons for and dominated balance for years.
And I mean, you get the shield pretty damn early. It's the standing still part that's just puts me off of Oracle. That, like, while stationary, you gain this. Like, that's just.
But you're doing that all the time. Like, you can't stop standing still, which is why I think, you know, we're going to be, and as not paradoxed, questioning Psi Infusion at level 1 because the mana is useless. You're pretty mana efficient, but having 33% range and speccing into a build that encourages you to always be wiggling and casting instantly, Shockrays lockdown for how long you would need to whip that baby out is dangerous.
Yeah, it's tricky. And it's like, Q build feels pretty bad without taking the movement speed at 4, but the wall does damage at 4, and it's a lot of damage. And it makes people have this problem of the easiest way around a wall that's kind of in the open is to walk along the wall and then away from it. That's the safest way to get out. But when the wall does damage, you can do walls in the open, and people's choice is walk along the side to get away or walk towards your team, which either option they die. And so it's like you have a talent that feels good and you have a talent that feels bad for the enemy team. Really, really bad. And so it's hard to really pick one. That's why I'm saying, like, even for Q build, there's probably still hybrids in there. That it's there's gonna be changes. I don't think it's gonna be any one. I think that's where they're trying to show us is like, they're like, you want to go Q build, and the laser does feel cool though. It does a lot of damage, and and then there's like a % health option later on. I do want to clarify. You mentioned that there's shields and spell armor and Oracle. Is there? Am I reading
I was talking
wrong?
about combining the plasma shield from the earlier level 4.
Oh, yeah. So you have your shield from like the earlier talent, and then you also have the healing, and you also have the spell armor.
Right.
You just have to sit still for a bit. Yeah, it's weird because it's like you could use it for reveal, or you could just use it to like heal, and like you just feel like a tank for a little bit. Like, as long as they don't have a lot of CC left over, you can just pop it and you're healing with spell armor, and it's like, okay, he's hard to kill now. So it's a really odd talent. I know I'm being an idiot about it. I know there's going to be something huge that's like that I'm missing.
The whole kit is going to make us idiots because everything is like gain a 35% slow, but your auto attack slows for 25, and these slows don't stack, so your brain just goes, is that 35 or is that 60? Because in some cases that's 60, and that seems crazy, and in some cases that's 35, and that's just an okay slow. It's like, that's where Sapphire got a lot of people confused, because it was like you slow for 30, but then Sapphire increases that by 40, and everyone's like, oh, 40 slow for a talent, that's not good. But then it was 70 and was like absolutely busted, and they had to nerf it. And it was like, so it's like, is that 60? It's like it's always weird. So I know there's stuff we're missing, but oh man, I can tell you there are some builds that do a lot of damage. And like I mean, I was just messing around with like the average healer and assassin, and like if you do take that wall at 4, just comboing your abilities, you can do like 80% of an assassin or healer's health at level 4.
And it's like, that is mind blowing to have a hero that can do that at range, still being in a safe position near their allies, and you're stuck. It's like, I think it's easy to point out like counters where it's like, oh, just play Anduin and rip them away. But it's like, I mean, assuming even against an Anduin, he can do this every 21 seconds, and Anduin's cooldown is 80 seconds. So it's like, anytime someone steps out of position, they can die against a new Tassadar, and that's scary. And that could be a damage number change. I think it's also easy to say, oh, just don't ever get out of position, always be with your team. But it's like, that's a cop out sometimes. He does a lot of damage, and I think 100 to 0 post level 16 or 20 is pretty safe. But to being able to 100 to 0 people as early as level 4, which is, I mean, 80 to 0 anyways, as early as level 4 is crazy. And then 16. And that's also a weirdly worded talent too. It says, if we go to his level 16, it says your W, which is your Psionic Storm, does damage 25% faster, which I had a math nerd tell me what that actually meant. And he said that it's effectively 40% more damage because of the way that it increases the damage as it deals more damage to them. And he's like, so that talent increases your W damage by 40%. I'm like, dang, like that's pretty huge.
Because it's
like,
a 20% increase in damage with like every tick.
Mm-hmm.
Is like the way the base Psionic Storm functions. So if you're increasing that, it's
charging up faster. Yeah. And so as level 16 talents, on average, they're worth about 30% of an increase. So Executioner is a 30% increase in value. And most talents tend to be around Executioner as far as percentage of value. So to have a 40% increase on a single talent is pretty valuable. And then you also have like you're going against a percent health talent, which is also really strong. So his 16 power spike is pretty brutal.
So where did you land on 10s? Because that seems to be the big point of contention, because it's the one we all understand. You're taking Archon or Black Hole?
I think Black Hole is so much fun. I don't even want to take anything else just because it's so much fun. But so I may be biased in this, that I'm excited that there's something other than Archon that I can take, and I still get Wall. But I mean, one of my favorite things is like when I started messing around with Black Hole and I saw it was just moving everything around, the first thing I wanted to do was combo that with Wall. And so my favorite thing to do now is to Black Hole, which then pulls in a couple people, then drop a wall down. So when it pulls everyone away, it leaves the one or two people that I pulled in are still stuck on this wall. Everyone else gets dragged away. So what ends up happening is you kind of do a Horrify, except for it's a Horrify where you keep two people stuck on your AoEs. And so it's just a better Horrify for your kit. And it's so strong. So if you guys haven't gotten that timing down, go into like try mode and just keep trying to do your gravity and your wall until you can grab one or two people and send everyone else flying, because it is hilariously powerful and it's a ton of fun if you can get it down.
What a setup too. Like if you have any kind of follow-up, ooh.
Yeah, so I love that. I almost can't go back to Archon just because I love that so much. But I do think there's still a place for Archon. Archon was one of the most powerful level 20 talents in the game, but there was a huge nerf that I see almost no one talking about. That Archon used to last forever, even if you were alone, because you could put a shield on yourself, heal for 75% of the damage done, and you do AoE damage in Archon. So it usually only took 2 auto attacks to full heal yourself out of any damage that you would have taken. You don't have that anymore. You do not have spell shield or spell lifesteal or whatever. Spell whatever you want to call it. Lifesteal. You don't have lifesteal anymore. And you don't have a self. I mean, you can still take the talent for the self shield anyways. So you just don't have that survivability. So Archon got a huge nerf, even though it still is probably one of the most powerful talents in the game. If your healer is paying attention to you, it is still one of the most powerful talents in the game. But Black Hole is so much fun. So that's where I'm landing on that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this conversation here has just been about the damage potential, and it almost seems like if Tassadar still had that self-healing on Archon, it would probably be too much.
Yeah, especially with all the auto attack talents. Like even in Archon, your auto attack talents, a lot of them still work. Like which is something that I guess I don't remember it happening in the past when he used to have like the beam that would grow and all that. I don't remember him having this ability to keep most of his auto attack talents. He doesn't keep like the bounce to multiple targets thing, but he does keep like he gains armor. He drops down psionic storms if you're at 100. Like he still does a lot of those things in Archon. So I think in the auto attack build, Archon's still very good. It allows you to reposition more and still get a lot of the benefits of the talents you took. Well,
I mean, we're describing basically a really fancy, entirely self-made Mighty Gust, where you are CCing and dividing. I mean, you're basically the perfect Falstad, but you did it all by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's Mighty Gust with Entomb. So you normally have Entomb, you 2 people, and then you Mighty Gust the rest of their team away, and the 2 in the Entomb are stunned against the Entomb, and you're doing that in a single hero, where you are locking 2 against the wall and pushing all of them else away. And it also has a stun baked into it, so it's almost better than that. But that is what it is. You have 2 different heroes' abilities just shoved into one.
And following that, you have Electric Fence slowing, dealing damage, and I totally see why that's where you've landed.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's definitely my go-to build right now.
So what about the Archon feature of lowering spell armor? Can we take Tassadar in a whoops, we double mage, let's throw another one on, why not, and like fix the comp situation?
I was like, we're adding that. Does Archon lower spell armor?
Yes. Splashes in a small area, reduces spell armor of heroes by 20 for 2 seconds out of those Archon attacks.
Okay, I missed that. That's actually pretty big then. I mean, they nerfed its survivability, but then they gave it the ability to add a little bit more burst. I mean, I feel like if you're going burst, you'd go black hole. But I mean, maybe it's more for the sustain, or maybe it's for double mage comp. I don't know. I mean, it could be. And what's the downside of running double mage comp, right? The downside usually is 1, if they pick a lot of spell armor, which this kind of answers a little bit, or 2, double mage comp is, I guess there's three issues. Mages tend to be more bursty, and so you tend to have either too much burst or like just not enough sustained damage. And I guess 3 is the mana problem, because auto attackers, they can do damage even if they run out of mana. So I mean, you could run a double mage comp with this as long as they don't have that mana problem, because like it kind of solves the first 2 issues, because you're kind of a sustained damage mage, sort of. So you could go Archon and like Q build, Archon to hit them, slow them, reduce their spell armor, and then Q to do huge bursts of damage, and it's a consistent damage, and you're likely not to have mana problems. So that could be something pretty powerful.
Before we move on, I do want to mention 2 bugs, or at least features, that are currently in the game for everyone out there. Imperius has a Q bug. It's tied to his animation. After he lunges, he takes a nice little break and kind of adjusts himself and stands up straight and leaves him very vulnerable for a time. So you might not want to be running Imperius for a little bit, unless we hear that's official, and you might want to do other builds other than Q. And Chen's stagger is currently counting as poison damage, which means that if you are defending on Chen, you are having a great time making the enemy aggroed.
Yeah, it's so odd. I don't actually know. So I heard about this bug. So how does it work in game? If you are Chen on offense, does the stagger damage count you as dealing damage to a hero, so then the turrets attack you? Or is it when you're on defense, who does the turret attack at that point?
Right. So a picture Lunara attacking you, you now have poison damage on you. The towers are mad at Lunara.
Yeah.
So a hero without damage over time, let's say Jaina Frostbolt hits you, you stagger that out. You are now as though hit by a Lunara attack, and Jaina will be aggroed for the duration of her poison damage, quote unquote.
So that's interesting, because I thought stagger worked as that you dealt damage to yourself, and it kind of like nullified. It forgets what dealt damage to you. It just is you deal damage to yourself, but I guess it remembers that. That's interesting.
There's also, you can play with this as well with, if you really wanted to, Mal'Ganis with Dark Conversion could do a negative switcheroo, where he actually takes his high health and gives it to an enemy hero. and now they have dealt damage to you by nature of you poisoning yourself.
I feel like it shouldn't work that way. Oh, I know it's a bug, but I feel like even as a bug, it shouldn't work that way.
Not addressed as a bug yet, so we don't know.
Oh, it's
Currently
a feature.
Yeah, currently a feature.
Okay. There you go. Yeah, no, odd. So
that seems so excruciatingly edge case that it shouldn't be intended, right?
Yeah. I don't know. That one's a weird one.
That is so unique.
Huge nerfs or buffs for them. I'm not really.
I don't know if I love or hate that.
I'm sad about the Imperious bugs because I actually really like Imperious as a hero. I think he's really neat.
Well, that one has been called out by a Blue as an issue, as a known issue that they're aware of. So I would imagine that hopefully taking a break, Imperious isn't going to be hanging around for too long.
Now, he's dealing damage to himself, though, so this might actually work on offense. I'm going to jump in and try mode Chen. While I do so, let's talk a little bit about Garden of Terror, which entered the official ranked rotation.
It's a weird map. So what I'm going to point out is that I actually had to build a strategy on this map about 2 weeks ago because a team that I was working with in NGS made a joke and they said, you know, it's funny because nobody plays Garden of Terror and nobody's played this map in a long time. And it's in the Nexus Gaming series rotation. So they're like, can you give us a strategy for this map, or do you know a strategy? So I just tore this map apart. I looked at any sort of replays that have been in any sort of competitive game in the last year, since it's rework anyways, and there's very few, by the way. And then I looked at all the different things that made this map unique, and I came up with several strategies. But I'm going to not go through all the different strategies for this map because, I mean, if you're in an uncoordinated environment, which is, I would imagine, the majority of the people that are trying to improve on this map, they just want to know what they can do on this map to make it more impactful. The first thing that I find that's weird about this map is every teamfight-oriented objective map in the game, the objective spawns on 3 minutes. What I mean by that is on a map like Dragonshire or Braxis, where it's not teamfight-oriented, well, you have to fight on the objective, but they're separate, that map spawns earlier. But for maps like Sky Temple, for maps like Battlefield of Eternity, Infernal Shrines, Cursed Hollow, all of those spawn at 3 minutes. Plant map feels like one of those maps. It should have the same mechanics as Cursed Hollow, but it doesn't. It spawns at 2:30 and it gives you the warning at 2 minutes as opposed to the other maps. Which means if you were to be picking up camps to set up for the objective, you need to be doing it earlier than you would normally do it. Speaking of camps, it's also the map that has the most neutral camps that are able to be taken as early as 1 minute in the game or each side. 3 camps on each side that are able to be taken by either team, making 6 camps, one of the largest amount, or the highest amount of camps on a single map. So that's the second thing that's really important to note. So camp clears are really, really big. Then I get this question a lot on this map, which is when you are defending, should you, I mean, this is one of the most powerful objectives in the game because it is Cursed Hollow mixed with Alterac, turning off structures, and also has a big body that's doing a lot. One of the most powerful objectives in the game. So objectives should be prioritized. You use camps to help you win the objective. But one thing that I get asked a lot is when you're on defense, do you defend? Do you kill the pot that's turning off your structures, or do you deal damage to the plant? And I have a very, very simple answer to this that will be a general rule. Of course, there's exceptions to it, but a general rule. The pot does not scale. So the pot is at 1,800 health from level 1 minute in the game, level 20 to 25 minutes in the game, same exact amount of health, which means early game, kill the plant monster, and late game, kill the pot. You still kill the plant monster, but you just kill the pot first, because it's going to be so much easier for you to do it quickly. Then finally, the last thing that I'm going to give you guys for strategy is the first objective always spawns in the bottom half of the map. So if you're on the left side, that means that you should be picking up the bottom camps first. Well, either side that you're on, you pick up the bottom camps first, and then you move to the top camps. But because it's in one of those weird center or like mirrored type things,
the left side has essentially a bonus because they have access to 2 camps.
2 camps on the bottom and 1 camp on the top. on the left side, and then on the right side there's 2 camps on the top and 1 camp on the bottom. Now the bruiser camps always go middle, the siege camps always go to the edge lanes.
So I guess that gives left side a little bit more of a window, really, because they don't have as long of a travel time.
The benefit is that both sides have siege camps for every objective, unlike Cursed Hollow, where only one side has a siege camp to push during the objective, while the other ones is easily cleared. So the benefit is, no matter what side you're on, if you're good with camps and camp timings, you will likely win this map. So the big thing is, no matter what role you're playing, I would play something that can clear camps. And then number 2, do what you can to win the objective. The first objective always spawns bottom, and then it alternates. So if it spawns bottom left, it's going to go top right, and then it's going to go, I believe it's this, and then top bottom. And the order is I'm actually going to link it to you guys, and you guys can put it up on the website and share it with the Discord and everything. And you guys can have the entire order out, because it always goes in the same one or other order. There's only 2 possible orders. Both of them start on the bottom. So I'll send those over to you guys. You guys can share that with the whole shebang. But that's the big thing. Is the big strategy I have for this map is try to win the objective, use camps, play someone that can do camps. And then when you are dealing with the objective early game, just don't even worry about the potted plant. And late game, kill the potted plant quickly. That's a general rule, because now with the new map mechanics or the new turret mechanics, you might find it beneficial to unlock your turrets if the enemies are playing really aggressive. But feel free to adjust based off of how you are feeling. You know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate you coming so well prepared on the subject of Garden of Terror.
That was a great mini rundown. What do you feel that what about the tanking kind of aspect of it, where a character that can take the meager damage goes in there, makes all the little minions mad, and then someone tries to channel behind it?
Oh yeah, I think corralling is really one of the best options. I call it corralling, but I've roam, whatever you want to call it, herding, or pulling everyone off to the side, all those minions off to the side, is a great way to have someone grab it quickly when no one's expecting it. Also, if you're running a lot of camp clear, those are usually also the heroes that can clear those things very quickly as well. So the speed is key, though. I mean, this objective, I'm not kidding, is one of the most powerful objectives in the game. So if you can win it, you're in a really good spot to gain a lead. And if you can get it quickly, like before level 10, I mean, this game, you're going to have a huge 3-level lead because of it. It is huge. It is a very, very powerful thing. So any tricks that you can do, if you have the tank who can grab everything and move it away so you can have like range pick it up, or if you just need to blow it up really quickly. I know sometimes when I play Jaina, I'll walk over there alone and I'll just blow up the minions, grab it really quick while my team is distracting them doing something else. But whatever resources you can do to win this objective, the better.
Good tips. And this is one of my favorite Jaina maps.
It's a lot of camps, and that objective is relatively easy to pick up on Jaina. So I really like it on Jaina as well.
Your tip about there being a siege camp available for any objective is like eye-opening. I never really thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's a very even map for both sides. I mean, yes, there, like you said, there's a shorter window, so you might need to wait a little bit longer on one side than the other. But there is the same amount of resources available to both teams at any given point in the map. It's just a matter of, do you have the tools to get those resources? And what are you going to do with those resources? Because you can push with camps, like the bruiser camps, for example. Those are great to push with. They give you spell armor, they do a lot of damage, and they have decent health pools. And now with the turret changes, if you eat a little bit of damage for them, they last longer. It's, I don't know, it's a really fair map. The only thing that really throws me off about this map, and it throws me off every time, is that it spawns 30 seconds earlier than every map that's similar to it. So I'm like, if you have a plan for camps, normally what I do on camps is I'll like on Cursed Hollow, I'll grab like the bruiser camp at 1 minute, and then I'll go over and I'll back, or I'll get some like soak or something, and then about 2 minutes I'll start working on the siege camp, and I'll have it ready about 2:30. This one, like, you have no window If you need to do camps, you from 1 minute to 2 minutes, you could be doing nonstop camps. And so you find the order that you can do it in, so you do it like the most efficiently. And then you might want to run with like a healer. Like I think a really good combo is like Greymane and Rhaegar. So that you can have like Rhaegar give the lightning shield to Greymane, keep Greymane alive, and Greymane can go. Let's say you need to do the top camp last to win this objective, because the first objective is always bottom, so you always want to do the top camp last. So you'll literally just go bottom camp with Rhaegar Greymane, middle camp, top camp, and then you probably don't even have enough time to back. And you just go straight over, pick up some fountains, and go straight over to the objective. You have this huge, if the enemies didn't do that, you have the 3 camp experience lead, and there's also things pushing in every lane. You just won the first objective without needing to do anything. Like without even needing to fight, you probably just won that first objective. So that's, I mean, like those 2 heroes would be like my prime. If you guys had 2 things you could pick on this map, that would be like my prime.
So think of it a little bit like a Battlefield of Eternity, where I feel like most players are used to having a very specific pick for that battleground.
Oh yeah. Like where you go normally race heavy on that map, camp heavy at least to win like the first objective or the first couple. But you can also overwhelm people very quickly, because if you could even push past the first forts, all of the opposing team's camps are now available for you to take. So you just need to be able to destroy those first 3 forts, which is why it can turn into kind of a snowballing map, because if you can win that first objective, most likely you're taking the entire 3 forts of the enemy team. So boom, now your high fast camp clearing team now has access to 6 potential camps that you can take at any given point. It's crazy.
Crazy things on Garden of Terror. Well, awesome. Well,
before we end,
yes.
Before we end, I have my report, and I was wrong. But so I apologize to all Chen mains, all 10 of you who were mad during that time. Okay, all right. So it's actually it's broken. It's crazy. So offensive, you are in tower range,
and you're hurting yourself.
It makes them mad at you, which makes no sense. But
makes no sense.
You could use this to your offensive advantage and say, all right, I'm gonna go and take some tower shots out in front of the minion wave, stagger it. Then when the minion wave gets there, walk back in range and drink through it and maintain aggro.
So you could use it as a strategy, because you can actually shield through so much damage. Right. And so that would be a pretty cool strategy. You won't have stagger available, but honestly, I mean, your shield is probably how you're going to be mitigating that damage anyway. So for Chen, you can use that as a benefit. For Mal'Ganis, you really should never be using your ult on a target that's lower health than you. But because that's wasting a huge cooldown, right?
Right. It's slightly. I did kill Arthas in try mode. Woo me. But no, he came at me in my lane. He was losing. He lost about 10% of his health. I dark conversioned him while I was full health, and all the targets immediately locked onto him. And I completed the kill on the other side. Because he dealt damage to me via this poison.
That's so odd. You would still imagine that would be Mal'Ganis doing damage to Mal'Ganis, but I guess that's how it's done. So
the Chen thing makes no sense though, because no hero is touching him, and yet the towers believe that
he's damaging himself. So the enemy tower, you're still doing damage. It's just not to my people, but you're still doing damage. So we're gonna hurt you. So I mean, it makes sense in the computer's eyes, but I don't know. That's interesting.
It's like there's outgoing damage from Chen onto a heroic target. It's just that the heroic target is himself.
It's himself, yeah.
That is so bizarre. And also, we are going to get so many tweets about this. But
it's a weird one.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a weird one for sure.
Thanks for.
I almost feel like the Chen one could stay. The Mal'Ganis one's very weird. The Chen one makes kind of sense. I mean, not for the towers making sense. It's just that you are dealing damage to a hero, so you should be targeted. It's just not an enemy hero, but it kind of makes sense. It's and I like the fact that you could kind of abuse that and eat up one of the turrets and just turn off that damage. So it's kind of a neat idea, but yeah, I don't know. I'd imagine both of those should get fixed, right? Maybe they're looking into them. I don't know.
I have to imagine. We'll ask some folks and see if we can get an answer by next week. If this doesn't already get some very obvious blue responses by them.
Yeah.
So, well, anyways, Not Paradox, we know you've got an event to cast after this. So we're going to wrap it up. Brings us to an end of this episode of Into the Nexus. Thank you so much for joining us. So before we go, as our guest host for the week, where can everyone find you?
Hey guys, if you guys don't know who I am, the majority of the content that I make anyways, it's on YouTube. It's on youtube.com/notparadox, and you can see all the things that's on there. I make majority Heroes of the Storm content, but when I start getting into a game for a little bit, I'll make a few videos for that and then move back to Heroes of the Storm content. It's all educational content with the exception of April Fools. Sorry about that. And everything else is always educational. I look at strategies from high level play. I also will make, I'll watch people in low level play, try to find out the different metas for both sides. So make sure to check that out. For all the other things, I was too dumb to get the same thing for everything. So instead of me saying like @not_paradox and not paradox official, if you just Google Not Paradox, you'll find all of my social as well in case you want to follow me anywhere else. And thank you guys so much for having me on. I always love being on here. I usually lurk when you guys are doing the shows. Otherwise, sometimes I chat, but for the most part, it's an awesome show.
Yeah, man, we never know. Sometimes Not Paradox just pops up in chat room with some big knowledge bomb. So it's always great. Always awesome talking to you, dude. So thanks for coming back on. Thank you to our patrons for supporting us and also so we can pay our guests for their time. Check it out over at patreon.com/ITN. Also, a huge thanks to our producers, Declan H, Cheesy Bob, Chris K, Mike C, and Eric C. Thank you for the generous support. To all 5 of you. Really, really appreciate it. If you want to watch us live, we're usually live Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern time. We went earlier today so that we get Not Paradox out of here in time to go cast. But normally, 3 p.m. Eastern time on Thursdays. Come join us live, twitch.tv/amovetv. Kyle, before we leave, where can people find you when you're not on Into the Nexus?
You can find me over at twitch.tv/Kyle Fergusson, where I'm playing Heroes of the Storm. And we spent the last year and a half, maybe longer, being a tank main. I'm done. Yeah, it was nice. I had a good time. We learned some ETC. We long ago learned Johanna, but it's time to get back to, frankly, Vala Malfurion is kind of the flavor over there at the moment. So enjoy the change up, a little Urel spice here and there over at twitch.tv/Kyle Fergusson.
I'm Garrett Art on Twitter. Everything this podcast included can be found over at amove.tv. Just put up a brand new episode of The Angry Chicken yesterday. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's some stuff happening over in Hearthstone. So if you like to get your hands on the card game every now and then that Blizzard puts out, go subscribe to The Angry Chicken wherever it is you get your podcasts. That's going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We'll see you in a week's time. But until then, good luck and have fun.
Take care.
All right. Thank you.